All right, we're going to jump back in time today, all the way back to 1984, which was a really fascinating year for The Cure. We're going to dig into this amazing BBC interview that gives us this rare look inside the head of Robert Smith, right as he was wrestling with fame, with his art, and believe it or not, with the idea of his own future.
And we have to start with this quote because really it's the key to everything else we're going to talk about. Just think about that for a second. This is a guy at the absolute peak of his fame, and he's already thinking about the end. But not in a sad way. It's more like he's thinking about it with this weird, deliberate sense of control. So what was really going on in his head? Well, that brings us to our first idea here, a restless mind. You see, even though The Cure was huge, Smith felt like he was trapped. He was in this constant creative and personal tug-of-war, just trying to figure out who he was outside of this massive public persona. So his first move was to try and get away from the very thing that made him famous in the first place, which leads us to our next section, why on earth he wanted to be forgotten. Now, while he was still fronting The Cure, he was also the guitarist for another giant band, Siouxsie and the Banshees, and his reason for doing both at the same time is super telling. And there it is, right from the source. This gets to the absolute heart of it. He wasn't just an artist anymore. He was becoming a character. The pressure of being Robert Smith of The Cure all day, every day, it was just grinding him down, and he needed an escape hatch to find the real him again. And this chart just lays it all out, plain and simple. With The Cure, he's the fort man, the focal point. Every single decision lands on his shoulders. But with the Banshees, he could literally just stand behind Siouxsie Sioux and be the guitarist. This wasn't some side hustle. He actually called it Robert time. It was his chance to just breathe and play music without all that pressure. Now, the Banshees wasn't his only escape route. He also had this other project, The Glove, with Steve Severin, and listen to how he described it, with this amazing contradiction. He said it was mentally very, very distressing, but at the same time, it was really good fun. That tells you everything, right? He was craving this chaotic, experimental energy, anything to break out of the box he felt he was being put in. Okay, so this brings us to one of the most misunderstood parts of The Cure's entire career, becoming the accidental pop star. Because right when Smith is off exploring all these darker, more experimental sounds, the band suddenly drops their biggest, sunniest pop hit ever. How does it even make sense?
It's a totally fair question, right? You've got these icons of gloom and goth rock, and all of a sudden they release this super jazzy, upbeat song that just flies up the charts. It is so easy to think, okay, this was a calculated move to get famous. But the truth is actually the complete opposite. Commercial suicide, can you believe that? According to Robert Smith himself, putting out Love Cats was seen as this huge risk. It sounded like nothing they had ever done, and frankly, it sounded like nothing else on the radio. It was so out of left field that they were worried it could actually damage their career for good. The story behind the song is just pure creative chaos. It all starts with this random, jazzy idea at a festival in France. Then, on a total whim, they detoured to Paris because he wanted this kind of slinky sound, which he said was inspired by the Disney movie The Aristocats. This wasn't some big marketing plan, it was just a spontaneous, fun adventure. And he made it absolutely clear this was a one-time deal. His exact words were that there would be no follow-up, no love dogs or whatever. It was a moment, it was an experiment, and then poof, it was over. And that was the whole point. This interview also shows us his really deep philosophy about being authentic, which brings us to our next section, the bootleg philosophy. See, when it came to making live albums, he had this vision that just went completely against everything the 80s music industry stood for. Just take a look at this comparison. Back then, most live albums were produced like crazy, polished until they sounded perfect, almost like a studio record. Smith, he hated that. For their album Concert, he wanted the total opposite. They mixed the whole thing in just 4 days to keep it sounding raw. And the packaging was intentionally cheap. It was made to look and feel like an unofficial bootleg. A snapshot of a real moment, not some glossy product. And that brings us to our final and honestly most jaw-dropping section. After all this creative chaos and wrestling with his identity, Smith turns his focus to his own career longevity, or what he saw as his lack of it. He just states it like it's a fact. The end is coming. Now, remember, this is 1984. Masterpieces like Disintegration and Wish, they're still years away.
Decades of sold-out world tours haven't even happened yet. But in his own mind, the clock was already ticking down. So, let's just pause here for a second. With this incredibly world-weary perspective, this deep dive into his own artistic mortality, how old do you think he was when he said all this? 25. He was just 25 years old. It's just an unbelievable revelation. I mean, at an age when most artists are just getting their footing, he was already mapping out his exit strategy. The self-awareness is just staggering. And this line drives the whole point home. He'd been doing this for 9 years, and he couldn't even imagine doing it for another 9. And the beautiful irony, of course, is that he would go on to lead The Cure for another 40 years. And counting.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that this mindset, it was never about giving up. Not at all. It was about taking control. By always thinking about the end, he was making sure that every single step he took along the way was his own, not one that was forced on him by fame or by what people expected. And this leaves us with one last, kind of provocative thought. For Robert Smith in 1984, thinking about his own artistic end wasn't a sign of weakness. It turned out to be his greatest strength. It gave him the freedom to experiment, to step away, to avoid burning out, and, in the end, to endure. It really makes you wonder, is embracing the idea of an ending the only way to build something that truly lasts?